I died, crushed under the weight of 840,000 in tax debt I didn't know existed until federal agents showed up at my door. Elena held my hand in the hospital, whispering that she loved me, that we'd get through this together. 3 days later, I flatlined. The last thing I heard was her crying. The first thing I heard when I woke up was her laughing. I opened my eyes to our old bedroom, the one we'd lived in before we bought the house, before Elena's business took off, before everything turned to ash. Morning light streamed through curtains I'd donated to Goodwill 4 years ago. My phone screen glowed. March 15th, my 30th birthday, 5 years before the IRS destroyed my life. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. The date was real. The apartment was real. I could hear Elena in the kitchen, her voice bright and cheerful as she talked to someone on speakerphone. I swung my legs out of bed, and my body felt different. Younger, unburdened by the stress that had carved lines into my face and turned my hair gray at 34. I was back. My chest tightened with a familiar ache as Elena's words filtered through the door. No, Mom, she doesn't suspect anything. Maya's so naive about money she barely even looks at the returns before signing. It's perfect. There it was. The knife slid between my ribs just as easily the second time around, but now I knew it was coming. I'm telling you, this business structure is genius. Elena continued. Everything's joint. Joint accounts, joint returns, joint debt if it ever comes to that. Which it won't, because I'm careful. But if something did happen, Maya's name is on everything too. Equal liability, Mom. That's the beauty of marriage. I stood frozen in my pajamas, listening to my wife plot my destruction on my 30th birthday. In my first life, I hadn't heard this conversation. I'd been at work, pulling a double shift at the hospital where I was a nurse. Elena had surprised me later with a birthday cake and promised me that her business success meant I could quit soon, that she'd take care of everything. I'd believed her because I loved her, because she was my wife, because trusting your partner wasn't supposed to be stupid. It had taken 4 more years for the trap to fully close. 4 years of Elena forging my signature on tax returns I never saw, hiding income in accounts I didn't know existed, claiming deductions for a business that was half legitimate and half fraud. 4 years of her mother, Patricia, slowly poisoning our relationship, encouraging Elena to keep me out of the boring financial stuff so I could focus on my little nursing career. When the IRS finally came, they came hard. Criminal tax evasion, fraud, conspiracy. Elena's business had underreported over $2 million in income across 3 years. The penalties and interest had ballooned into a nightmare. And because we filed jointly, because both our names were on the returns, because I'd signed where Elena told me to sign, I was equally liable. Elena had cried beautifully at my arraignment. Her lawyer was better than mine. She cut a deal, testified that I was the bookkeeper, that I had insisted on the aggressive deductions, that she'd trusted me to handle the taxes because I was so much better with numbers. The prosecutor had loved that angle, the manipulative nurse who'd convinced her successful entrepreneur wife to break the law. I'd gotten 18 months in federal prison. Elena got probation and a payment plan. By the time I got out, she'd divorced me, married someone else, and moved to Florida. I was released to a halfway house with a destroyed nursing license, a criminal record, and debt I'd be paying until I died, which I did 3 months later when my heart gave out from the stress. But now I was here, standing in our old apartment, listening to the woman I'd loved plan my destruction like it was a game of chess. I need to go, Mom. It's her birthday. I should pretend to care. Elena laughed, that bright, crystalline sound that used to make my stomach flutter. Love you too. The call ended. I heard her footsteps approaching the bedroom. I had maybe 5 seconds to decide who I was going to be. The old Maya would have confronted her, would have cried, demanded explanations, believed whatever lies Elena spun, would have been manipulated into thinking she'd misheard, misunderstood, was being paranoid. The new Maya knew better. I plastered on a smile and climbed back into bed just as Elena opened the door, carrying a tray with pancakes and orange juice. She looked so beautiful it hurt. Dark hair cascading over her shoulders, green eyes bright with false affection, wearing the silk robe I'd saved for months to buy her last Christmas. Happy birthday, baby! She set the tray on my lap and kissed my forehead. I made your favorite. You're too good to me, I said, and meant it in ways she'd never understand. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with the kind of attention that used to make me feel cherished. Now I recognized it for what it was. Assessment. making sure her mark was still hooked. I was thinking, Elena said, playing with my hair, maybe it's time we made things official, financially. Here it was, the first step. What do you mean? Well, we're married, but we still have separate accounts, file separately. It's inefficient. Her smile was warm, genuine looking. She'd practiced this. My accountant says we'd save so much on taxes if we filed jointly, and I want to add you to my business accounts. You should have access to everything. We're partners, right? In my first life, I'd been touched by this gesture. It had felt like trust, like she was finally letting me into the parts of her life she'd kept separate. I'd signed everything she put in front of me, grateful to be included. Now I understood. She was building the framework of my imprisonment. That sounds wonderful, I said. Fork paused halfway to my mouth. But are you sure? Your business is doing so well, and I don't know anything about... That's exactly why I want you involved, Elena interrupted, squeezing my hand. You're so smart, Maya. You could really help me. And this way, if anything ever happened to me, you'd be protected. You'd have access to everything. If anything ever happened to me. The irony was suffocating. Okay, I said softly. If you think it's best. Her smile widened. Perfect. I'll have my lawyer drop the paperwork. We can sign everything next week. She kissed me again, deeper this time, and I kissed her back, because that's what the old Maya would do. The Maya who didn't know that in 4 years, those signatures would be used as evidence of my willing participation in fraud. But I knew something Elena didn't. I knew about Form 8857, Innocent Spouse Relief. It was a provision in the tax code that could absolve one spouse of liability for the other's tax fraud if you could prove you didn't know about it, didn't benefit from it, and it would be unfair to hold you responsible. In my first life, I'd learned about it too late, after I'd already been convicted. My lawyer had mentioned it in passing, said it wouldn't have helped anyway because I'd signed the returns. But sitting in my prison cell, I'd researched it obsessively, understanding too late all the ways I could have protected myself if I'd just known. Now I knew, and I had 5 years to build an airtight case. The next week blurred past in a carefully orchestrated performance. I went to work, came home, kissed my wife, and pretended to be exactly who I'd been the first time around. Naive, trusting, a little intimidated by Elena's success, and grateful for her love. But in the quiet moments, during my breaks at the hospital, late at night when Elena was working, I planned. First, I needed documentation. In my first life, I'd discovered too late that Elena had been forging my signature on tax returns for years. This time, I'd make sure there was a clear record of what I did and didn't know. I opened a separate email account Elena didn't know about. I bought a small safe deposit box at a bank across town. And I started keeping a journal, meticulously dated and detailed, documenting every conversation about finances, every time Elena told me not to worry about the boring business stuff, every instance of her mother suggesting I was too simple to understand entrepreneurship. The paperwork Elena's lawyer prepared was exactly as predatory as I remembered. Joint bank accounts with my name added to Elena's business checking and savings. A power of attorney giving her authority to sign tax documents on my behalf for convenience. An operating agreement for her LLC that made me a 50% owner in name, but gave Elena sole decision-making authority. I read every word this time. This seems like a lot, I said carefully, looking up at Elena across our kitchen. Though, maybe I should have a lawyer look at it. Her expression flickered, just for a second, before the warm smile returned. Baby, this is from my lawyer. He's protecting us both, but if it would make you feel better, sure, get a second opinion. She was calling my bluff. In the first life, I'd backed down, embarrassed by my own suspicion. This time I nodded. I think I will, just to be safe. Elena's jaw tightened. Maya, come on. Don't you trust me? Of course I trust you, I said, reaching for her hand. This is just... It's a lot of legal language. I want to make sure I understand what I'm signing, for both of us. I watched her recalculate, adjust her approach. You're right, she said finally. You're so smart to be careful. That's why I love you. Tell you what, take it to a lawyer, get their opinion, But can we do it this week? My accountant needs this finalized before tax season really hits. Of course, I said. I did take it to a lawyer. Just not the kind of lawyer Elena expected. Thomas Chen's office was in a modest building 30 miles from our apartment, far enough that I wouldn't accidentally run into anyone from Elena's circle. I'd found him through careful research. He specialized in tax law and fraud defense, with a particular expertise in spousal liability cases. In my first life, I'd never known lawyers like him existed. "Ms. Reyes," he said, gesturing me into his office, "you said on the phone this was about a prenuptial review?" I lied, I said flatly. "My wife is going to commit tax fraud, frame me for it, and destroy my life. I need to make sure that when she does, I can prove I had no idea." To his credit, Thomas didn't even blink. He simply picked up a legal pad and pen. "Tell me everything." I did. All of it. The business Elena was running. A marketing consultancy that was legitimate on the surface, but involved significant unreported cash income from clients who wanted to avoid their own taxes. The shell. Corporations her mother had helped her set up. The aggressive deductions she planned to claim. The way she was positioning me as a co-owner while keeping me completely uninformed about the actual finances. "And you know this how?" Thomas asked. I'd prepared for this question. I overheard her talking to her mother. They were very explicit. It wasn't quite a lie. "Can you prove that conversation happened?" "No, but I can prove everything that happens from this point forward." Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You understand what you're asking me to help you do? You want to let your wife commit crimes while gathering evidence against her." "I want to protect myself from crimes she's already planning to commit," I corrected. "In a way that doesn't require me to divorce her right now and warn her that I know." "Why not just leave?" "Because in my first life, I'd loved her too much to see what she was. Because I'd believed in our marriage, in her goodness, in the life we were building. Because I'd been a fool. Because leaving now doesn't stop her," I said instead. "She'll just find another victim, another person to manipulate and destroy, and she'll be more careful next time." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'll help you, but you need to understand the risks. If the IRS or federal prosecutors think you knowingly participated in fraud, having a lawyer won't save you. Your best defense is genuine ignorance." "I know," I said. "That's why I need you to tell me exactly how to stay ignorant." We spent the next 3 hours mapping out a strategy. Thomas explained the key elements I'd need to prove innocent spouse relief: lack of knowledge, lack of benefit, and unfairness of holding me liable. The plan was simple in concept, agonizing in execution. I would sign Elena's documents, but only after documenting my repeated requests for explanations that Elena refused to provide. I would ask questions about the business in writing via email that Elena would dismiss or ignore. I would maintain my own separate financial accounts for my nursing income, never commingling my legitimate earnings with her fraudulent business funds. I would keep meticulous records of my own expenses and assets, proving I didn't live beyond the means of my honest income. And critically, I would never, ever involve myself in the actual business operations. I wouldn't attend client meetings, wouldn't handle the books, wouldn't make decisions about deductions or reporting. I would be exactly what Elena wanted me to be: a signature on a page, a name on a form, a liability shield, except I'd have proof that's all I was. "The payment plan," I said as we neared the end of our meeting. "What about that?" Thomas frowned. "What payment plan?" I hesitated. This was knowledge from my first life, from a future that hadn't happened yet, but I needed to plant the seed now. "If the IRS comes after her, and we end up owing money. If Elena asks me to agree to a payment plan, should I?" "Absolutely not," Thomas said immediately. "That would suggest you acknowledge the debt as legitimate and accept responsibility for it. It would devastate any innocent spouse claim." I filed that away. When the time came, I'd do exactly the opposite of what my lawyer advised, because I needed Elena to think she'd won. I signed Elena's paperwork 3 days later, after sending her multiple emails asking for clarification that she'd breezily dismissed as legal boilerplate and nothing to worry about. I saved every email. printed them, put copies in my safe deposit box. Elena was thrilled. She celebrated by taking me to an expensive dinner, charging it to the business card she'd just added my name to. I ordered the cheapest entree on the menu and paid for my own wine in cash. The receipt went into my safe deposit box too. This became my life. A carefully choreographed dance of participation and documentation. When Elena asked me to sign tax returns, I did. But only after asking questions in writing about the numbers that never matched what I thought the business was earning. Elena's responses were always dismissive, always variations of "my accountant handled it," or "you wouldn't understand the deductions." Perfect. When her mother, Patricia, started showing up at our apartment with expensive gifts, a new laptop for Elena, designer handbags, a weekend trip to Napa, I documented how the money came from Elena's business account, the account I supposedly had access to, but never actually touched. I kept my own banking statements showing my modest nurse's salary going toward rent, groceries, and student loans. 2 different financial lives lived side by side. The hardest part wasn't the planning. It was pretending to still be in love. Elena was a phenomenal actress, but she wasn't actually acting. She believed her own performance. She'd convinced herself that she did love me, in her way, that she was building us a future, that the fraud was justified because it would lead to wealth we could share. She didn't understand that love wasn't supposed to come with an exit strategy that involved your partner taking the fall. 6 months after my rebirth, Elena's business was booming. She'd expanded into new markets, hired staff, opened a second office. To anyone looking from the outside, she was a successful young entrepreneur with a devoted wife and a bright future. To anyone looking at the actual books, the real books she kept hidden in encrypted files on her laptop, she was reporting about 40% of her actual income and claiming deductions for everything from fictional business expenses to family vacations labeled as client development. I knew this because I'd hired a forensic accountant. Thomas had recommended her, Sarah Martinez, a woman who'd spent 15 years with the IRS before going private. She specialized in finding financial fraud that others missed. "This is sophisticated," Sarah told me, reviewing the limited information I'd been able to access. "Your wife knows exactly what she's doing. See these cash payments from clients? They're structured to stay just under reporting thresholds. And these deductions? They're aggressive but not quite illegal on their own. It's the pattern that's damning." "Can you prove it?" If I had access to everything, yes. But that's not really the question, is it? Sarah looked at me over her reading glasses. "The question is whether you can prove you didn't know." "Can I?" She considered. "You're building a good case. The separate finances help. The documented requests for information that were denied. The fact that you're not involved in business operations?" She paused. "But there's a vulnerability." "What?" "You live with her. You benefit from the lifestyle her unreported income provides. A prosecutor could argue you must have known something was wrong, that no one is that naive." My throat tightened. This was exactly what had destroyed me in my first life. "So, what do I do?" "You need to establish a pattern of Elena actively hiding information from you, not just dismissing your questions, but deliberately keeping you in the dark, lying to your face, creating a false reality for you to live in." I thought about that. What if I started asking to be more involved? What if I pushed to see the actual books, attend business meetings, understand the clients? Sarah smiled grimly. "And when she refuses, which she will, you document it, every time. You build a record of attempted due diligence that she blocks." So that's what I did. "I was thinking," I said to Elena one night over dinner, "maybe I could help more with the business. I have some time between shifts, and I'd love to understand what you do." Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That's sweet, baby, but you're already working so hard at the hospital. I don't want to burden you." "It wouldn't be a burden. I want to support you." "You do support me," she said firmly. "By being you, by being my safe place to come home to. The business stuff is stressful and boring. Let me handle it." I sent her an email the next day, reiterating my request. She never responded. I tried again 2 weeks later. I was looking at our bank statements, and I noticed some big deposits. Business must be really good. Elena's expression cooled. "Are you checking up on me?" "No, We're joined on the account now, so I see the notifications. I'm just curious about how you're doing. The business is fine. Great, actually. You don't need to worry about it. I'm not worried, I just want to understand. Maya, her voice went hard. I handle the business. That's our arrangement. You focus on your nursing, I focus on my company. Okay? I nodded, properly chastised, and then I wrote down the entire conversation in my journal, noting the date, time, and her exact words. You focus on your nursing, I focus on my company. That's our arrangement. Proof that she'd explicitly excluded me from business knowledge. This pattern repeated over the next year. Every time I tried to engage with the financial side of our life, Elena shut me down, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly, but always completely. Her mother started getting involved too, taking me aside to explain that Elena works so hard, and you're not really a business person, dear, and the best thing you can do is trust her. I recorded some of those conversations on my phone, just audio, easy enough to do with the device in my pocket. Patricia had a particularly lovely monologue about how I should be grateful Elena was willing to carry the financial burden of our marriage. I was very grateful. That recording would be excellent evidence. Meanwhile, the fraud was escalating. Elena hired her brother, Marcus, giving him a 6-figure salary for a job he barely showed up for. She bought a Tesla and wrote it off as a business expense despite using it primarily for personal trips. She funneled money through a complex network of LLCs that her mother had helped establish, each one designed to obscure income and inflate deductions. And every April, she prepared our joint tax returns with her accountant, brought them home, and had me sign where she'd marked with sticky tabs. "What's this deduction for?" I'd ask, pointing to a line item. "Business development. Don't worry about it." "And this income? It seems lower than what I thought the business was making." "That's because you don't understand accounting, baby. There's revenue versus profit, depreciation, all sorts of things. This is what we actually owe taxes on." I'd sign. And then I'd photograph every page, documenting her explanations in writing, noting my questions and her dismissals, building my case page by page, year by year. The charade took its toll. I cried sometimes, late at night, when Elena was working late, which usually meant drinks with clients, paid for with unreported cash. Not because I still loved her. That emotion had died the moment I heard her laughing about my naivety on the phone with her mother, but because I was lonely. I'd cut myself off from my friends, the way Elena had encouraged in my first life. I worked long shifts at the hospital, came home to an empty apartment, and spent my evenings documenting my own destruction. Except this time, I was the one holding the knife. 3 years into my second life, the IRS finally took notice. I'd been wondering when it would happen. In my first life, they'd come in year 4, launching a full audit that unraveled everything. This time, I'd given them a little help, an anonymous tip, carefully worded, pointing them toward Elena's largest client, a real estate developer who was also committing fraud. When the IRS investigated him, they'd naturally look at his expenses, and they'd find Elena's company, and they'd start asking questions. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Notice of audit. Elena went pale when she opened it. Fuck. I looked up from my book, careful to seem only mildly concerned. What is it? The IRS wants to audit the business. This is bad. Why? You've been careful, right? Your accountant knows what he's doing? She shot me a look I couldn't quite read. Fear? Calculation? Yeah, of course. It's just, audits are intense. They'll want to see everything. Then let them see everything, I said simply. If we haven't done anything wrong, we have nothing to worry about. Elena laughed, a brittle sound. You're so naive sometimes. The IRS doesn't care about right or wrong. They care about finding money. I let that sit between us. Then, should we get a lawyer? I'll handle it, she said quickly. You don't need to be involved? Elena, if they're auditing the business and I'm listed as a co-owner, I said I'll handle it. She was on her feet now, pacing. Just trust me, okay? I've dealt with stuff like this before. It'll be fine. I'd never seen her deal with anything like this before, but I nodded. Okay, whatever you think is best. She calmed down, came over to kiss the top of my head. I'm sorry for snapping. This is just stressful, but I'll take care of it. I'll take care of us. The audit process was brutal, and I wasn't even directly involved. Elena disappeared into meetings with her accountant and her newly hired tax attorney. She stopped sleeping, started drinking more. Her mother was at the apartment constantly. The two of them huddled over documents, speaking in low voices that cut off when I entered the room. I played my part perfectly. The concerned but clueless spouse, offering support, asking if there was anything I could do, being gently rebuffed. "Just keep working," Elena told me. "We might need your income to be solid right now." My income, not our income, just mine. Documented that too. 6 months into the audit, Elena came home with her mother and Marcus. They had the look of people who'd just decided something important. "We need to talk," Elena said. I set down my coffee. "Okay." Patricia took the lead, which should have been my first warning. "Maya, dear, we've been discussing the audit situation. It's become clear that there were some irregularities in how the business taxes were filed." My heart rate picked up, but I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of irregularities?" "Nothing serious," Marcus jumped in. "Just some aggressive deductions that the IRS is questioning. But here's the thing. The accountant is saying that because you're listed as a co-owner and you signed the returns, technically you're liable too." "But I don't know anything about the deductions," I said carefully. "Elena handles all of that." "We know that," Patricia said smoothly. "And that's what we're going to tell them. But in the meantime, the IRS has proposed a payment plan for the back taxes and penalties. It's substantial, about $175,000 over 5 years. I felt the trap closing. This was different from my first life, where the amount had been much larger and had come later. They were trying to lock me in early while the numbers were still manageable. "That's a lot of money," I said. "It is," Elena agreed. "But if we don't agree to the payment plan, they could push for criminal charges against both of us." There it was, the threat. Criminal charges for what? I didn't do anything wrong. I know that, baby. But the IRS doesn't see it that way. Your name is on the returns. You're a co-owner. They see you as equally responsible. Elena took my hands. "But if we agree to the payment plan, they'll drop the criminal investigation. We'll just pay the money and move on. Can we afford that?" "We'll make it work," Patricia said. "The business can cover most of it. And you might need to pick up some extra shifts, but—" "My shifts," I repeated, "to pay for Elena's business taxes." "Our business taxes," Elena corrected. "You're a co-owner, remember?" I looked at her, this woman I'd married, who died with me in my first life and was now casually discussing how I'd help pay for her crimes. "I need to think about it," I said. Elena's grip on my hands tightened. "There's not much time to think. The IRS wants an answer by next week." "Then I'll have an answer by next week." I pulled away and went to our bedroom, closing the door on their protests. I called Thomas that night from the hospital bathroom during my break. "They want me to agree to a payment plan," I said. "You told me not to." "And I stand by that advice," Thomas said. "Agreeing to a payment plan is acknowledging the legitimacy of the debt. It will severely damage any innocent spouse claim." "What if I'm building a different case?" Silence. Then, "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to agree to the payment plan," I said. And then, "When the full scope of the fraud comes out, and it will come out, because this audit is just the beginning, I'm going to file for innocent spouse relief, and I'm going to use the fact that I agreed to this payment plan as proof that I was being coerced and manipulated by Elena and her family." "That's risky." "But possible." More silence. "If you can prove duress, if you can show that you were pressured into agreeing, that you didn't understand the full situation, that you were operating under false information provided by your spouse, I can prove all of that. Then, yes, it's possible, but Maya, you need to understand. If this goes wrong, you'll be on the hook for everything. Not just $175,000. Everything they eventually find." "I know," I said. "But I also know that if I don't do this, Elena will find a way to pin it all on me anyway. At least this way, I control the narrative." I agreed to the payment plan the next day. Elena was so relieved she cried. Real tears. This time, I think. "Thank you, baby. Thank you. I know this is hard, but we'll get through it together. I promise. I signed the agreement the IRS sent over. Then I photographed it, printed it, and put it in my safe deposit box along with a detailed memo I'd written about the conversation with Elena, Patricia, and Marcus. How they'd threatened criminal charges. How they'd made it clear I had no choice. How Elena had promised we'd get through it together. The first payment was due 30 days later, $2,916.67. Elena's business account paid it. But I kept the documentation showing it came from the fraudulent business, not from my legitimate nursing income. I was building a timeline, a story, a trail of evidence that would show exactly who knew what and when. And I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It took another year. The IRS expanded their audit from Elena's company to her mother's network of LLCs, then to Marcus's consulting income, then, inevitably, to our personal returns for the past 6 years. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, when they looked beyond the business deductions and started examining the hidden income, the unreported cash, the shell corporations designed to obscure money, the fraud that totaled not $175,000, but closer to $2 million in unpaid taxes. Elena's lawyer called an emergency meeting. This time, Elena didn't try to keep me out of it. The situation has evolved, the lawyer said, which was an impressive euphemism for "you're fucked." How bad? Elena asked. Criminal referral bad. The IRS has evidence of systematic tax evasion, falsified records, fraudulent deductions. They're talking about multiple felonies. Patricia went white. Marcus swore. Elena just stared at the table. What are our options? I asked quietly. The lawyer looked at me like he'd forgotten I was there. For you, Ms. Reyes, I'd strongly suggest you get your own attorney. Why would I need my own attorney? Because your interests are no longer aligned with your wife's. The government will likely argue that you were complicit in the fraud. Your best option is probably to cooperate with prosecutors. She's not cooperating with anyone, Elena snapped. We're a team. We signed those returns together. We'll deal with this together. The lawyer gave her a pitying look. Mrs. Reyes, I need to be very clear. The evidence suggests you were the primary actor in this fraud. Your best strategy is to minimize your wife's involvement, to argue that she was an unknowing participant who trusted you to handle the finances. You want me to throw Maya under the bus? I want you to avoid 20 years in federal prison. Elena looked at me then, really looked at me. I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes, saw her weighing options, measuring risks, deciding how to play this. No, she said finally. I won't do that to her. It was almost convincing, but I'd lived through this once before. I knew that Elena's nobility had a shelf life of approximately 3 weeks, right up until the prosecutors offered her a deal she couldn't refuse. I stood up. I need some air. I walked out of the lawyer's office, out of the building, and straight to Thomas Chen's office across town. It's time, I told him. We filed for divorce the next morning. I moved out of our apartment that afternoon, staying with a coworker while I looked for a new place. And 3 days later, Thomas submitted Form 8857 to the IRS on my behalf. Request for innocent spouse relief. The form was comprehensive. Attached to it were 3 years of documentation, emails showing my repeated requests for financial information that Elena denied, text messages of her dismissing my concerns, journal entries detailing conversations where she explicitly excluded me from business decisions, recordings of Patricia explaining that I wasn't business-minded enough to understand, bank statements showing 2 separate financial lives, my modest nursing income used for basic expenses, Elena's lavish business spending I never touched, testimony from my coworkers about my work schedule proving I couldn't have been at the business meetings where fraudulent decisions were made, expert analysis from Sarah Martinez, the forensic accountant, demonstrating that the fraud was sophisticated enough to require extensive financial knowledge I demonstrably didn't have, and most damningly, documentation of the payment plan agreement, including my memo about being pressured and threatened into signing it. Proof that Elena had used the threat of my criminal prosecution to coerce me into accepting liability for her crimes. Thomas had done his job well. The filing was airtight. Elena found out about it when the IRS contacted her lawyer to inform him that her spouse was now claiming innocent status and seeking relief from joint liability. She called me 17 times in 2 hours. I didn't answer. Finally, she showed up at my coworker's apartment, pounding on the door at midnight. "Maya, open this door!" I opened it. "You need to leave." "How could you do this?" Her face was red, furious. "How could you betray me like this?" The laugh that escaped me was genuine. "Betray you? Elena, you've been planning to frame me for tax fraud since before we even got married." "That's not... I heard you. On my 30th birthday, talking to your mother about how naive I was, how you'd set up the joint accounts, so I'd be equally liable if anything went wrong." She went still. "You're lying." "I'm really not." I met her eyes. "I've known for 3 years what you were planning, and I've spent 3 years documenting every single thing you did to manipulate me, exclude me from financial decisions, and set me up to take the fall." Understanding dawned on her face, followed by something that might have been respect if it wasn't mixed with so much rage. "You've been planning this the whole time." "Yes. The questions about the business, the requests to be involved, the payment plan. You wanted me to pressure you into signing it." "Yes. You played me." "I learned from the best," I said. "Now get off my porch before I call the cops." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned and left. I never saw her again in person. The IRS investigation took another 8 months. During that time, I cooperated fully, turning over every piece of documentation I had. I sat for multiple interviews, answering questions honestly and completely. I told them everything. How Elena had isolated me from the financial side of our marriage, how her family had reinforced my exclusion, how I'd been threatened into signing the payment plan. I provided evidence for every claim. Elena, meanwhile, was trying a different strategy. Her lawyer had convinced her that her best shot was to claim I had been more involved than I appeared, that I'd helped plan some of the deductions, that I'd known about the hidden income, that I'd benefited from the lifestyle the fraud provided. It was exactly what she'd done in my first life, but this time I had proof she was lying. The forensic accountant testified that the fraud required specialized knowledge of tax law and business accounting, knowledge my employment and education records showed I didn't possess. My employer testified to my work schedule, showing I was pulling 60-hour weeks at the hospital during the periods when key fraudulent decisions were being made. My bank records showed I'd never accessed the business accounts Elena had supposedly given me joint control over. And most powerfully, I had 3 years of contemporaneous documentation showing Elena actively preventing me from understanding the finances. The prosecutor assigned to the case was a woman named Jennifer Wu. She reviewed my innocent spouse filing, looked at Elena's claims, and made a decision. "Ms. Reyes," she said during one of our meetings, "I want to be clear about something. Your wife is going to prison. The evidence against her is overwhelming. The only question is whether you go with her." My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "I understand. I've reviewed your documentation. I've interviewed witnesses, and I believe you were a victim of financial fraud, not a perpetrator." She paused. "But I need you to understand something else. If you're lying to me, if we find any evidence that you were more involved than you've claimed, I will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law." "I'm not lying," I said. "Then we have a deal. You'll receive innocent spouse relief. You won't be charged criminally, and in exchange, you'll testify at your wife's trial about the ways she manipulated and deceived you." I thought about Elena in our old apartment, laughing on the phone about my naivety. I thought about Patricia's condescending explanations of why I couldn't understand business. I thought about the moment in my first life when federal agents had handcuffed me while Elena cried fake tears. "I'll testify," I said. The trial was brutal. Elena's defense was that she'd been influenced by her mother, that the tax strategies had seemed legitimate at the time, that she'd made mistakes but hadn't intended to break the law. She portrayed herself as an overwhelmed entrepreneur who trusted the wrong advisors. She very carefully avoided claiming I'd been involved. Her lawyer had apparently explained that my documentation was too solid, my innocent spouse filing too airtight. Attacking me would only make her look worse. But Patricia had no such restraint. "That woman," she said, pointing at me from the witness stand, knew exactly what was happening. She signed those returns. She benefited from the money. And now she's trying to save herself by destroying my daughter. The prosecutor pulled out my recordings. Mrs. Alvarez, is this your voice? She played the clip. You're not really a business person, dear. The best thing you can do is trust Elena. Patricia went red. That's out of context. Here's another one. The recording of her explaining that I should be grateful Elena was willing to carry the financial burden of our marriage. And one more. Patricia telling Elena, in a conversation she didn't know I'd recorded, that I was perfect because I didn't ask questions. The jury was not sympathetic. I testified on a Thursday afternoon. The prosecutor walked me through the timeline. Elena's exclusion of me from financial decisions, her family's reinforcement of my ignorance, the pressure to sign the payment plan. Ms. Reyes, did you know your wife was committing tax fraud? No. Did you benefit from the unreported income? I don't believe so. I lived on my nursing salary. The extravagant expenses were Elena's. Did you want to understand the family finances? Yes. I asked repeatedly. Elena refused to explain things to me. Why do you think she did that? I looked at Elena for the first time since the trial started. She was staring at the table, her expensive lawyer beside her, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than I made in a month, because she needed someone to blame if she got caught, I said, and she thought I loved her too much to realize what she was doing. Elena's lawyer tried to shake my testimony on cross-examination, but Thomas had prepared me well. I answered every question calmly, referred to my documentation when needed, and never wavered from the truth. I hadn't known. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Guilty on all counts. Elena was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison with restitution of $2.3 million plus penalties and interest. Patricia got 4 years for conspiracy and money laundering. Marcus got 18 months for his role in the scheme. I got my innocent spouse relief approved. 0 liability, 0 penalties, 0 jail time. The IRS even refunded me the payments I'd made on the payment plan, $35,000 total. Money that had come from Elena's fraudulent business account, but had legally been paid toward a debt that was no longer considered mine. I used it for the down payment on a small house across town. The divorce was finalized 3 months after Elena's sentencing. She didn't contest it. Her lawyer explained that fighting would be pointless. I had grounds for fault-based divorce on top of everything else. She signed the papers from prison. I got the apartment, the car we'd bought together, in my name, thankfully, and half of the legitimate assets that hadn't been seized by the government, which wasn't much, but it was something. Elena got a prison sentence and a ruined reputation. I'd like to say I felt triumphant, that I celebrated my victory, toasted my freedom, reveled in her destruction. But mostly I just felt tired. I'd spent 3 years living a lie, documenting my own manipulation, pretending to be someone I wasn't. I'd sacrificed friendships, isolated myself, and turned my marriage into a long-con evidence-gathering operation. I'd won. But victory tasted like ash. The nightmares came sometimes, dreams where I was back in my first life, in handcuffs, in prison, dying alone. Dreams where Elena's plan had worked, and I hadn't been smart enough to stop it. I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Sarah Kim specialized in financial trauma and abuse. Yes, that's a real thing, I learned. She helped me understand that what Elena had done wasn't just fraud. It was intimate partner abuse, financial coercion, a systematic campaign to control and ultimately destroy me. You're a survivor, Dr. Kim told me. Not just of the fraud, but of a deeply manipulative relationship. I don't feel like a survivor, I said. I feel like I became just as manipulative as her. I lied for 3 years. I set a trap. I let her keep committing crimes so I could gather evidence. You protected yourself, she corrected gently. There's a difference between manipulation for exploitation and strategic self-defense. Maybe. I was still working on believing that. My nursing career, at least, was intact. I'd made sure to excel at work during those 3 years, building relationships with colleagues, earning promotions, establishing myself as a dedicated professional. When the scandal broke, my coworkers rallied around me. They'd seen how hard I worked, how Elena never came to hospital events, how I'd seemed confused and distressed during the audit. I was a victim in their eyes. And for once, being seen as a victim was helpful. I got promoted to charge nurse 6 months after the trial. Better pay, better hours, better life. I bought plants for my little house, learned to cook for one, started making friends outside of work. Real friends, not people Elena had approved of. I went on a few dates, nothing serious. It would be a long time before I trusted someone enough to combine finances or sign joint. Anything. But I was alive, free, safe, and Elena was in prison. 2 years after her sentencing, I got a letter forwarded from my lawyer. Prison mail, carefully screened. It was from Elena. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Maya, I'm not supposed to contact you. My lawyer said it was a bad idea, but I need you to understand something. I did love you. I know you don't believe that now. I know what I did was unforgivable, but when I married you, I genuinely loved you. The fraud started small. Just a few deductions my mother suggested, a little unreported income here and there. It snowballed. And by the time I realized how deep I was terrified. So I did what she taught me to do. I found someone to share the liability. I told myself it was okay because we were married, because we'd share the money, because you'd benefit from the lifestyle. I told myself a lot of lies. I never thought you'd find out. And I definitely never thought you were smart enough to outplay me. That sounds cruel, but it's honest. I underestimated you. My whole family did. We thought you were this sweet, naive nurse who'd never question anything. You weren't? Or maybe you were and you changed. I don't know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. Really see you. And I'm sorry I didn't before. Elena. I read it twice. Then I put it through my shredder. She was right about one thing. She had underestimated me. They all had, but that was their mistake, not mine. I thought sometimes about telling her the truth, about the rebirth, about knowing what she'd planned before she'd even fully planned it, about having literally died from her betrayal and been given a second chance to stop it. But what would be the point? She wouldn't believe me. And even if she did, it wouldn't change anything. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. The only difference was that I'd made mine with perfect information. 5 years after my rebirth, 4 years after the trial, I was sitting in my backyard on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Maya Reyes? Speaking? This is Jennifer Wu. I was the prosecutor on your case. Do you have a moment? My heart rate picked up. Of course. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Actually, I'm calling because I wanted to let you know that Elena Alvarez is up for early release. Good behavior, completed her financial literacy courses, participated in the prison work program. The coffee turned sour in my mouth. How early? She served 4 years of an 8-year sentence. With time served and good behavior, she could be out in 6 months. Okay. I didn't know what else to say. I wanted to give you a heads up and to let you know that as part of her release conditions, she's prohibited from contacting you. If she tries, you call me immediately. I will, thank you. How are you? Doing, Maya, really? The question surprised me. I'm good. Better. I have a house, a job I love. I'm seeing someone. That was new. Rachel, a physical therapist I'd met at a hospital fundraiser. We'd been dating for 3 months. She knew about Elena, about the trial, and hadn't run away screaming. Good, Jennifer said warmly. You deserve it. What Elena did to you was despicable, and you handled it with incredible courage. After we hung up, I sat with the news. Elena would be free soon, back in the world, rebuilding her life. Part of me wanted to be angry. 4 years wasn't enough, not for what she'd done. But mostly I just felt done. Elena wasn't my problem anymore. She was someone I used to know, someone who'd tried to destroy me and failed. She'd have to live with that failure, with the knowledge that I'd beaten her at her own game. That was punishment enough. I called Rachel. Hey, are you free tonight? I want to tell you something. Everything okay? Yeah, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. Everything's good. I want to talk about the future. Our future. I could hear her smile through the phone. I'd like that. We went to dinner at a nice restaurant. Nothing too expensive, but nice. I paid with my own credit card, the one in just my name, that I monitored carefully and paid off in full every month. Over dessert, I told Rachel that I'd like her to meet my friends. My real friends, the ones I'd made after Elena, who knew me as I actually was. I'd love to, she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Her touch was warm, real. No hidden agenda, no manipulation, no trap waiting to spring. Just two people, building something honest. That night, back in my little house with my plants and my furniture and my life that was entirely, completely mine, I took out my journal, the one I'd kept for 3 years, documenting Elena's fraud. I flipped through it one last time, saw my handwriting evolve from shaky and scared to confident and precise, saw the evidence pile up, page after page, proof of crimes and manipulation and calculated cruelty. Then I drove to the beach and burned it. I didn't need it anymore. The legal case was closed. The IRS had my official documentation. This journal was just a reminder of the worst 3 years of my lives. Both of them. I watched the pages curl and blacken, smoke rising into the dark sky. When it was done, I scattered the ashes in the ocean and went home. Elena had tried to trap me in her fraud. In my first life, she'd succeeded. But in this life, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. The best revenge isn't just winning, it's being free. I woke up the next morning in my own house, in my own bed, next to a woman who loved me honestly. I went to work and saved lives. I came home and tended my garden. I lived my life on my terms, with my money, building my future. And somewhere, Elena was in prison, counting down the days until release, knowing that when she got out, she'd be starting over with nothing. No business, no money, no wife, no family. Her mother and brother wanted nothing to do with her now that the money was gone, just a criminal record and a ruined reputation. While I had everything. The payment plan had been her masterstroke, or so she'd thought. Lock me into accepting liability, make me complicit in repaying debt I didn't understand, bind me to her crimes. But innocent spouse relief was mine. I'd agreed to the payment plan. Then I'd filed the one form she never saw coming. And I'd won. Not just my freedom, not just my innocence, but my whole damn life back. The irony was perfect. Elena had spent years planning my destruction, carefully constructing a financial prison designed to trap me. But I'd escaped, and the door had locked behind me, with her on the other side. Sometimes late at night, when the house was quiet and I couldn't sleep, I'd think about that moment in my first life. Dying. In a hospital bed, crushed by debt and betrayal, while Elena held my hand and lied about loving me. I'd been given an impossible gift, the chance to live that life again, but better. I'd used it. And now, finally, I was free. Not because Elena was in prison, though that helped, but because I'd learned the truth. Love without trust is just manipulation with better marketing. Elena had loved me, in her way, but she'd loved her schemes more. I'd loved her too, once, but I loved myself more. And that made all the difference. I never wrote to Elena, never visited, never responded to the few letters she managed to send through mutual acquaintances before they realized I wasn't interested. She'd asked me once, through her lawyer during the divorce proceedings, if I'd always known, if I'd been playing her from the start. I'd told the truth. I figured it out. Let her wonder when. Let her question every conversation, every signature, every moment she thought she had me fooled. Let her live with the uncertainty the way she'd planned for me to live with the debt. Rachel and I moved in together after a year. We combined some things, streaming services, groceries, the electric bill, but we kept our finances separate, at her suggestion. Not because I don't trust you, she'd said carefully, but because trust isn't the same as wisdom. We can love each other and still maintain boundaries. I'd kissed her for that. She understood. She'd had her own Elena once, a different name, a different scheme, but the same fundamental betrayal. We were both survivors of financial abuse. We knew the importance of protecting yourself, even in love, especially in love. On the 5-year anniversary of my rebirth, I got a call from Sarah Martinez, my forensic accountant. "I'm testifying in another case," she said. Another innocent spouse situation. The wife had no idea her husband was running a Ponzi scheme through their joint accounts. Will she win her relief claim? I don't know. Her documentation isn't as good as yours was. She trusted too much, didn't ask enough questions, didn't keep separate finances. A pause. I told her lawyer about your case, how you'd managed to prove innocence despite being legally entangled. I hope that's okay. It's fine, I said. If it helps her, use whatever you need. Because that was the thing. I'd won my case, but there were others like me. People who'd trusted the wrong person, who'd signed the wrong forms, who were being destroyed by someone they loved. Maybe my story could help them. I started speaking at conferences about financial abuse in marriages. Not many at first, just small legal education seminars, CLE courses for divorce lawyers, that sort of thing. But word spread. I told my story without the rebirth part, obviously. That stayed mine. But I told them about the red flags I'd missed, or pretended to miss, the isolation, the dismissal of my questions, the separate reality Elena had constructed. And I told them about the documentation, the emails, the journals, the separate accounts, the careful building of proof. If you suspect your partner is committing fraud, I'd say, don't confront them, document. Every question you ask that goes unanswered, every time they tell you not to worry about money, every extravagant purchase that doesn't match what you think they earn, document it. Innocent spouse relief is real, but you have to prove you truly didn't know. And the IRS is skeptical. They assume married people know what their partners are doing. So prove them wrong. Prove that you tried to know and were actively prevented from knowing. Prove that you lived separate financial lives. Prove that you were a victim, not an accomplice. Some lawyers thanked me after these talks. Some victims reached out, asking for advice. I helped where I could, because Elena had taught me something valuable, even if she hadn't meant to. Knowledge is power, but documented. Knowledge is a weapon, and sometimes you need a weapon to survive the people who claim to love you. The first time I ran into someone from Elena's family, Marcus, at a grocery store, I almost turned and fled. But then I remembered, I'd done nothing wrong. So I finished my shopping, walked past him in the cereal aisle, and met his eyes when he stared. He looked away first. Good. Patricia sent me a Christmas card once, from prison. It was a strange choice. The card had a Bible verse about forgiveness. I sent it back, unopened, marked Return to Sender. Some things didn't deserve forgiveness. Some people didn't deserve second chances. Elena got out of prison after serving 4.5 years. I heard about it through Jennifer Wu, who called to remind me about the no contact order. She's on supervised release, Jennifer said. Probation, mandatory financial counseling, regular check-ins. If she comes near you, she goes right back. She won't, I said. She's not. Stupid. No, Jennifer agreed. She's not. But she is desperate. She has no money, no job prospects with a felony conviction, no family support. Desperate people do unpredictable things. I thought about that. If she contacts me, I'll let you know immediately. She did contact me exactly once, 3 months after her release. Not directly. Through a mutual friend from our old life, someone who didn't know the full story, who thought we'd just grown apart. Elena asked me to tell you she's sorry, the friend said over coffee. She knows she can't reach out directly, but she wanted you to know. Okay, I said. She's really struggling, Maya. She's working 2 minimum wage jobs, living in a studio apartment. Her mother won't talk to her. She's completely alone. Okay, I said again. The friend looked frustrated. Don't you feel anything? She was your wife? She was a lot of things, I said carefully. My wife, my partner, the person who tried to send me to federal prison for her crimes, the person who manipulated and gaslit me for years, the person who told her mother I was too naive to ever figure out what she was doing. The friend went quiet. I'm sorry she's struggling, I continued. I genuinely am, but that's not my responsibility. She made her choices. These are the consequences. I never heard from that friend again. Fine. Elena's struggles weren't my problem. Her redemption wasn't my responsibility. Her future wasn't my concern. I'd saved myself. That was enough. Rachel and I got married on a beach in Oregon with a small group of friends and a very specific prenuptial agreement. Separate finances, separate tax returns, complete financial transparency, but maintained independence. This is the least romantic prenup in history, Rachel joked as we signed it. It's the most honest. I countered. We're promising to love each other without using each other. I can live with that. So could I. Our wedding was nothing like my first one. No elaborate ceremony, no expensive venue, no family drama. Just two women who understood the value of trust and the necessity of boundaries, promising to build a life together. Thomas Chen came to the wedding. So did Sarah Martinez. Jennifer Wu sent a card. My colleagues from the hospital filled out the rest of the small crowd. No one from my old life with Elena was there. That life was over. I'd killed it, carefully and methodically, and built something new from the ashes. During our vows, I promised Rachel honesty, transparency, partnership without possession. She promised the same. We meant it. That night, in our hotel room, Rachel asked me something she'd been holding back. Do you ever wish you'd handled it differently with Elena? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. I wish I'd never met her. I wish I'd never fallen for her manipulations. But once I understood what she was doing, no, I handled it the only way that would keep me safe. Do you think she understands why you did it? I don't know. I don't care. And I didn't. Elena's understanding, her forgiveness, her opinion, none of it mattered. I'd reclaimed my life. That was the only thing that mattered. 7 years after my rebirth, I was promoted to director of nursing at the hospital. Good salary, excellent benefits, the respect of my colleagues. I'd rebuilt everything Elena had tried to destroy. Rachel's private practice was thriving. We'd bought a bigger house together, carefully structured ownership, obviously. We were talking about maybe adopting a dog. Life was good, stable, honest, free. And then I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "I know what you did." My blood went cold. I opened it. Maya, you don't know me, but I know you. Or rather, I know your story. The whole story. The one you haven't told anyone. I know about the rebirth. We need to talk. A friend. My hands were shaking. This wasn't possible. I'd never told anyone about dying and waking up 5 years in the past. It was insane, unbelievable, the kind of thing that would get me committed if I shared it. How could anyone know? I stared at the email for a long time. Then I deleted it. If this was someone's idea of a game, I wasn't playing. I'd spent 3 years playing games with Elena. I was done. But 3 days later, another email arrived. You can delete these all you want, but I know the truth, and I can prove it. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here because I need help. I'm like you. Please. Coffee tomorrow? There's a cafe on Market Street. I'll be there at 2 p.m. I'll be wearing a blue scarf. You don't have to believe me. Just hear me out. Sarah, I almost didn't go, but curiosity won. Again. The cafe was public, crowded, safe enough. I arrived early, scoped out exits, kept my phone in my hand. At 2:01, a woman walked in wearing a blue scarf. She was younger than me, maybe 25, with tired eyes and the kind of tension that comes from carrying too much weight. She saw me, somehow she knew it was me, and walked over. Maya? Who are you? My name is Sarah Chen. And 2 months ago, I died in a car accident caused by my husband's drunk driving. When I woke up, it was 3 years earlier, on my wedding day. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. So I called off the wedding, and now he's stalking me, threatening me, and I don't know what to do. Because how do I explain to the police that I'm afraid of something he hasn't done yet, but I know he will do because I've already lived through it once? I stared at her. I know you'll think I'm crazy, she continued. I know this sounds impossible, but then I found articles about your case, about how you'd somehow documented everything perfectly, how you'd known to keep separate finances, how you'd protected yourself in ways that only make sense if you knew what was coming. And I thought, maybe? She pulled out her phone, showed me a news article. The headline, Local woman dies in drunk driving accident, husband charged. The date, 3 months from now in what would have been her original timeline. That's what would have happened, Sarah said, if I'd married him, if I hadn't come back. I should have walked away. This was insane, impossible, but I looked at this young woman, terrified and desperate and completely alone with knowledge no one would believe. I knew exactly how that felt. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk." We talked for 3 hours. She told me her story. Her fiancé, charming and successful, who drank too much and drove anyway, who'd caused an accident that killed her and another driver, who'd gotten charged with vehicular manslaughter, but would probably serve minimal time. She'd woken up on her wedding day and called it off. And now he was unraveling, escalating, becoming dangerous in different ways than the timeline she'd lived through. "I don't know how to stop him," she said. "I don't know how to prove he's a threat when he hasn't actually done anything yet." "Yes, he has," I said. "He just hasn't done the specific thing you remember. But threatening you? Stalking you? That's real. That's happening now." I taught her what I'd learned. Documentation, evidence, building a paper trail. I gave her Thomas Chen's number, Sarah Martinez's contact info, Jennifer Wu's email. "You can't prevent him from being who he is," I told her, "but you can protect yourself from who he'll become." She cried, thanked me, asked if we could stay in touch. I said yes, because maybe this was why I'd been given a second chance, not just to save myself, but to help others like me. Over the next year, I heard from 3 more people, each with the same impossible story. They'd died, or nearly died, or lost everything, and they'd woken up with a chance to change it. Each one desperate, terrified, alone with knowledge they couldn't share. Until they found me. I helped where I could. Advice, connections, strategies. I taught them about documentation, about legal protections, about how to change your future without revealing how you knew it needed to be changed. I became a specialist in a field that didn't officially exist, helping people prepare for disasters they couldn't explain how they knew were coming. Rachel knew something had changed. She asked once what I was doing with all the phone calls, the long meetings, the careful advice I was giving to strangers. "Helping people protect themselves from the people they love," I said. It was true enough. She accepted that. 10 years after my rebirth, I stopped counting. The anniversary had stopped mattering somewhere along the way. I wasn't living in reaction to my death anymore, wasn't measuring everything against the life I'd lost. I was just living, working, loving, helping, being free. Elena was released from parole after serving her full term. I heard she'd moved to another state, was working as a waitress, had maybe found God or sobriety or some other form of redemption. Good for her. I didn't hate her anymore. Didn't think about her much at all. She was just someone who'd tried to destroy me and failed. A lesson learned, a nightmare survived, a life left behind. I woke up one morning in my house with Rachel beside me, sunlight streaming through the windows, our dog snoring at the foot of the bed. I had work in an hour. A meeting with a young man who'd emailed me desperately, saying he needed help protecting himself from his business partner who hadn't betrayed him yet but would. I understood that. I'd help if I could. But first, coffee, breakfast, a kiss from my wife, the simple pleasures of a life honestly lived. Elena had tried to trap me in her fraud, but instead, I'd built myself an escape. After Rebirth,
This
I'd agreed
Valentine's
to the
Day,
payment plan for her,
send your beloved
then I'd
one a
filed for
card
innocent
they will
spouse
never
relief,
forget.
and I'd won
Only at
everything that
Hallmark,
my ties
the unforgettable
mattered.
way
My
to
freedom,
send a
my
message.
future, my life, and no one, not Elena, not the IRS, not the universe itself,
This Valentine's
could
Day,
take that away from
let
me
your
again.
love speak
I
for
was
itself.
finally
Only at
completely,
Hallmark.
irrevocably
Our fine
free.
selection of cards
And that
come
was
in a
the
variety
best
of
revenge of all.
unforgettable statements, from ransom-style notes to traditional Black Dahlia. This Valentine's Day, send your beloved one a card they will never forget. Only at Hallmark, the unforgettable way to send a message. Every kiss begins with K, ass voice. The wheels must unite. I thought I was on ad time. Hi, King. Hi, Bento. I've been painting. Way too much with it. Yeah. I had to give it a few different reads. You know, you want to give 3 takes. Any good audition tape will give 3 options. And then, you know what? They can pick what they like. You just want them to hear everything. Let them know what you can do. Hallmark. You spoil us. M? Oh, God. Someone hold me. I'm scared. Nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday. And right now, you can save £50 per person. That's £200 off for a family of 4. Something like that. Sometimes I like to do that. On a walk that I do, there's a fucking, like film, camera, security camera. And every time it activates and it goes, "Hi, you are currently being recorded." And every time I walk past and I say, "Hi, hi." And I try and get it right. "Hi, hi, hi, you are currently being recorded." I have to mock it every time. We're having a fire sale. You could do the store ads that play at my job every hour. I'm so sorry. Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. Says something like that. Nails it 100%. I don't know the script. I love it. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Stupid! I nearly fucking spat my coffee. You're welcome. I don't know why I don't work all the time in voiceover. I mean, I do, but not in that kind of voiceover, you know? I'm screwing myself by not auditioning for stuff. I know. Fucking idiot. Hi, 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 hi. You are currently being recorded. Hi. Stupid. Stupid. Hey, Sobeys shoppers. We actively check market prices on select items, and if we're not already the lowest, you automatically get the difference in scene plus points. How's that for easy? Stream is broken again. Hi. Hi. I'm so confused. I'm at my job. Oh, I'm taken back. Oh, good. Sobeys. Makes you want to see and never skip. If you end up on Reddit again, you did it to yourself. Oh, someone put me on Reddit, please. We actually got there were a ton of follows from that random Reddit post. It was, what is it, live stream fails, but it was actually